You weren't taken down by some obvious enemy in armor. You were taken down by something soft, a gentle smile, a steady gaze, a perfectly timed, "I'm here for you." And you believed it. Of course you did, because since you were a kid, the world has been feeding you the same script. If you're kind enough, people will be kind back. If you're honest, people will be honest with you. If you're real, the world will reward you. But look at where you are now. No broken bones, no visible scars. Just a heart that feels picked clean by people who smiled while they were taking, and a mind worn down by silence, disappointment, and slow erosion. You're not stupid. You were trained to believe that sincerity equals safety, that pure intentions are a shield, that if you just keep showing up with a good heart, you can't really lose. But you did lose, not because you were bad, but because you never learned the law Machiavelli laid down centuries ago. People are driven less by goodness and more by necessity. They don't stay because they love you. They stay because it's convenient, because you don't question them, because your silence makes their life easier. And when they've taken what they needed, they don't explode. They don't explain. They just quietly vanish. Just absence. And you're left asking yourself, was my kindness a mistake? Was my warmth just weakness dressed up as virtue? Maybe I really am too soft for a world this sharp. Let's be honest. This is not a video for people who want to be comforted. This is not a just be yourself and everything will work out speech. This is war, not the kind with fists. It's a quiet war, psychological, subtle, constant. And for a long time you've been losing it without even knowing there was a battlefield. This is for the ones drained from always being reachable, forgiving, and available. The ones everyone leans on, but no one shows up for. If you've caught yourself thinking, why do manipulators always win? Why do the softest hearts bleed the most? Why does giving everything get me nothing? Then it's time to stop looking at the world like a dreamer and start looking at it like a strategist. Because here, we don't teach you how to be softer, we teach you how to be sharper, not by screaming, not by becoming cruel, but by becoming unreadable, controlled, and quietly dangerous. It begins with unlearning the most comforting lie you were ever sold. That goodness guarantees protection. It doesn't. What actually protects you is how you carry yourself, how you read people, and how firmly you enforce your limits. So ask yourself honestly, do you have that? Or have you just been hoping that if you're kind enough, life will eventually go easy on you? Because the kind of pain you've been carrying doesn't scream. It doesn't cause scenes. It just sits there, quiet, private, unseen. It's the kind of pain that never got permission to exist. So you buried it and called it being mature. People look at you calm, composed, reasonable, and assume you're fine. They see your patience and call it wisdom. They see your forgiveness and call it virtue. But they have no idea what it costs you to stay that calm. You haven't been untouched by life. You've been worn down by it. Not by cruelty, but by erosion. By people who leaned on your empathy until it cracked, who treated your compassion like permission, who confused your loyalty with blindness. And the worst part? You helped them. Not because you're weak, but because you were hopeful. You wanted to believe they would change, that if you stayed soft, they would eventually soften too, that if you kept understanding them, someone would eventually understand you. But they didn't. No one did. And still, you stayed, because that's what you were taught. Stay kind, stay good, stay available.
Be the bigger person.
So you shrank. You swallowed your needs. You became the easy one, the peacekeeper, the person who doesn't ask for much. The one who stays even when nobody notices you're disappearing inside your own life. People called you mature, wise, a good person. But what they meant was, you're convenient. You don't make us uncomfortable. You carry the weight so we don't have to. You took their pain and buried your own. You labeled it strength. But somewhere deep inside, you knew something was dying. Because real strength isn't about staying quiet. It's about being clear. It's not about tolerating pain with a smile. It's about knowing when to walk away before it kills the part of you that can still feel. Machiavelli would have told you plainly, if your silence keeps the peace but costs you your soul, that's not virtue. That's surrender. And the truth is, you've surrendered 1,000 times, not in battle, but in everyday moments, when you stayed silent instead of speaking your truth, when you kept the peace instead of protecting your boundaries, when you bit your tongue instead of saying, that's not okay. You've swallowed your voice so many times that it started to taste normal. Why? Because you were afraid. Afraid of being too much. Afraid of the silence that might follow honesty. Afraid of being painted as the villain in someone else's story. But stop and think for a second. Who's been the villain in your story? Who gained from the version of you that never fought back? Who benefited from your compliance and called it love? Who praised your patience while slowly draining your power? Here's the hard truth. You've been bleeding quietly and calling it strength. But bleeding isn't strength. It's a warning sign you've been ignoring for years. You thought if you just kept enduring, things would eventually get better. But endurance without recognition isn't loyalty. It's erasure. And you deserve more than being erased for the sake of keeping others comfortable. So this is your permission. The one you've been waiting for but never got. Permission to stop performing peace for people who thrive on your silence. Permission to stop shrinking so others feel tall. Permission to stop mistaking availability for virtue. Let them say you've changed. Let them call you distant, cold, unrecognizable. They're not wrong. They're just mourning the version of you that never said no. The one they could guilt, persuade, and manipulate without consequence. You're not their mirror anymore. You're not their comfort. You're not their emotional sponge. You're something else now. Heavier, sharper, colder, but unbreakable. You are sovereign, and this is the beginning of your return. You've been told that your softness was the problem, that maybe if you were tougher, more detached, more like them, you wouldn't hurt so much. But here's the twist. Your softness was never the problem. The conditioning around it was. You were trained to lose, not through violence, but through emotional design. Think about it. From the time you could speak, you were rewarded for being agreeable, for smiling when something hurt, for saying yes when every cell in your body screamed no. And every time you complied, someone said, "Good job, you're so mature." But what they really meant was, "You're easy to manage." They taught you that pleasing others meant you were safe. That comfort equals connection. That being liked is more important than being respected. And so, your nervous system adapted. It memorized the rule no one ever said out loud. Don't make things difficult. Now you flinch at confrontation. You apologize for your tone even when you didn't do anything wrong. You over-explain, hoping that if you're clear enough they'll finally understand. That's not your personality. That's programming. And the world doesn't just tolerate that programming, it feeds on it. Look around. We glorify self-sacrifice. We romanticize the bigger person. We praise endless giving, then abandon the givers the moment they need something back. You think people love your goodness, but what they actually love is your predictability. Because as Machiavelli knew long before modern psychology gave it a name, he who reveals his intentions has already surrendered. In other words, transparency is currency, and you've been giving it away for free. Every time you explain your pain hoping for compassion, every time you justify your standards to avoid being labeled difficult, Every time you tell someone where your mind or heart is going, you hand them a map. And maps aren't just for people who want to find you. They're for people who want to corner you. Not everyone who mirrors your feelings is trying to connect. Some are trying to measure you, to learn your emotional pattern so they can control it. Because if they can predict you, they can move you. And if they can move you, they can use you. It's not always malicious. Sometimes it's unconscious. People naturally gravitate toward what they can control, even when they call it love. And once they've learned your pattern, they'll test it. They'll disappear just long enough to make you chase, then return just long enough to reset the cycle. And you'll stay not because you're naive, but because you're hopeful. You'll call it love. They'll call it control. But here's the revelation. Clarity isn't cruelty. Boundaries aren't betrayal. And being unreadable isn't manipulation, it's protection. You've spent your whole life trying to be understood. Now it's time to become unpredictable. Not to deceive, but to defend. Because when no one can read you, no one can script you. No one can bait you. No one can play a game you didn't agree to join. You've spent your whole life believing that vulnerability equals connection. That if you open up, people will open up too. But here's the dark truth. In the wrong hands, vulnerability isn't connection, it's leverage. And that's how the world has been using you. Quietly, efficiently, predictably. You were never born to be this soft. You were trained to be, rewarded for compliance, praised for endurance, told that patience and silence were signs of maturity. But every good job you earned for suppressing yourself was really someone celebrating their ability to control you. They taught you that if you just kept being the bigger person, things would get better. That love meant tolerance. That being nice made you safe. But niceness without limits isn't virtue. It's self-erasure. That's why Machiavelli warned against being naive. He didn't hate goodness. He just knew it couldn't survive without defense. He wrote about a world where morality bends to necessity, where people do not act out of fairness, but out of gain. And when you ignore that, you make yourself a tool in someone else's game. Look at your patterns. You think being nice keeps the peace. But real peace doesn't come from avoidance. It comes from boundaries. The peace you've been protecting is fake. It's just control wearing a friendly face. Because when you're always nice, people stop respecting your tone and start testing your limits. They don't admire your kindness. They interpret it as access. That's why Machiavelli would say, warmth should be a choice, not a default. Your presence can be kind, but your availability must be earned. Stop mistaking emotional exposure for intimacy. Oversharing isn't connection, it's self-disarmament. When you reveal everything too soon, you hand over the manual to your own mind. And once someone memorizes it, they don't need to care, they just need to predict. Machiavelli called it a fatal error. He who exposes his plans gives his enemies the knife. So when you feel that urge to explain, to justify, to make them understand, don't. Let silence protect you. Let mystery do the talking. You don't owe your internal world to anyone who hasn't earned it through consistency, respect, and time. And here's another illusion you need to break. Endurance is not loyalty. You've been praised for how long you stay, how much you tolerate, how easily you forgive. They call it love. They call it devotion. But Machiavelli would call it submission. Because staying in the same pain and calling it strength is not love. It's programming. You've convinced yourself that if you just hold on long enough, things will change. But people don't change when you endure them. They change when they fear losing you. If your loyalty has no line, they'll keep crossing it. Endurance without reciprocity doesn't make you noble. It makes you invisible. So ask yourself, who benefits from your silence? Who profits from your endless forgiveness? Who taught you that being uncomfortable was the price of being loved? That's not love. That's emotional conditioning. You've been applauding yourself for surviving when you should have been demanding more than survival. And it's not your fault. You were trained to see suffering as virtue, but it's time to unlearn that. Because the longer you confuse self-betrayal for compassion, the longer you stay trapped in cycles where your pain becomes someone else's comfort. You think strength means staying calm while you're breaking. You think patience is letting people drain you because they need you. But Machiavelli understood mercy without control breeds chaos. And that's exactly what your life has been. Silent chaos. So stop making your boundaries polite. Stop forgiving without consequence. Stop teaching people that harming you is reversible. Because every time you do, you train them to believe your pain doesn't matter, that your no isn't real, that your soul is negotiable. You've been performing strength, but real power doesn't perform it in forces. You don't need to yell. You don't need to prove. You don't even need to explain. You just need to decide what you will and won't allow, and act accordingly. No announcement required. Machiavelli wrote, "Never do your enemy a small injury. If you strike, strike with finality." In psychological terms, that means, don't set half boundaries. Don't deliver empty threats. Don't keep the door cracked open for people who've already shown they'll walk through it with muddy boots. Your forgiveness means nothing if it's predictable. Your kindness loses value when it's endless. The truth is, people don't stop testing you because you're good. They stop because they realize there's a cost. And that's the shift you're about to make. You're done being easy to reach, easy to read, easy to use. From now on, your energy isn't a donation. It's earned access. Your silence isn't submission, it's control. Your distance isn't coldness, it's calibration. Because power isn't loud. It's precise. You don't have to destroy anyone to reclaim it. You just have to stop making yourself available to those who drain it. You're not cruel for protecting your peace. You're not distant for choosing clarity. You're not arrogant for enforcing boundaries that should have been respected all along. You've been told that goodness means giving endlessly. But Machiavelli knew what most people still deny. The world doesn't reward the endlessly good. It rewards the strategically aware. Because goodness without awareness is a leash. Awareness without goodness is cruelty. The balance, that's power. So from now on, don't aim to be liked. Aim to be respected. Don't aim to be understood. Aim to be unreadable. Don't aim to be soft. Aim to be solid. Let your silence carry more weight than your explanations. Let your absence be felt louder than your presence ever was. This is not about becoming cold. It's about becoming conscious. Machiavelli didn't write for the dreamers. He wrote for the ones brave enough to wake up. And now that you've seen the truth, you can't go back. You were never meant to be managed. You were meant to be remembered. And from this moment on, you will be. Quietly, unmistakably, sovereign. Let's talk about what comes next. Because awareness without action is just another kind of paralysis. You've seen how you were conditioned. You've seen how your goodness became your cage. But now it's time to move differently, not louder, not harsher, but smarter. Machiavelli said, "The first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him. Your circle is your reflection. It reveals what you tolerate, what you prioritize, and how much of yourself you still give away for free." So, let's start there. If you want to outsmart the world, you can't keep narrating your soul to people who've already proven they don't know what to do with it. Stop explaining yourself to those who only listen to respond. Stop announcing your every move. Stop broadcasting your healing journey like it's public property. Every time you narrate your next step, you hand people the power to anticipate you. and predictability is vulnerability. Move in silence. Let your distance speak. Let your decisions arrive unannounced. Confusion, when chosen strategically, is control. It makes people pause. It shifts the power dynamic without a single confrontation. They can't attack what they can't anticipate. And this is where subtlety becomes your weapon. When they ask for explanations, give stillness. When they demand reasons, offer silence. When they push for access, show restraint. Your unpredictability will become their discomfort, and their discomfort is your leverage. Don't overpower people. Outpace them. While they're talking, you're moving. While they're trying to decode you, you're already 3 steps ahead. This is not manipulation. It's emotional strategy, a discipline that turns awareness into power. Because here's the truth. Those who can't predict you can't control you. And when you stop giving people the script, they start stumbling over their lines. Use absence as a message. If you're always available, you stop being valuable. People don't treasure what they can access on demand. They treasure what they might lose. Withdraw, not to punish, but to reset the power dynamic. Let silence become the mirror that forces others to see themselves. When you vanish without announcement, they remember, they rethink, they feel the void. And that's when they realize your presence was never ordinary. It was holding everything together. But they will test you. They'll use guilt. They'll use nostalgia. They'll play the victim because they're used to you bending. They'll expect the old version of you, the one who explained, justified, forgave. Don't take the bait. Don't respond out of habit. Don't soften because of history. Don't explain your new silence with old logic. Your lack of reaction is the disruption. When their old patterns stop working, they'll either evolve or exit, and both outcomes serve you. Remember, Machiavelli never said to be cruel. He said to be deliberate. So be deliberate with your presence. Don't show up where you're not respected. Don't speak just to fill silence. Don't give just to be remembered. Let your absence build intrigue. Let your stillness command pause. When you walk into a room, don't chase the energy, set it. That's not arrogance. That's precision. And precision is the dividing line between kings and pawns. Because real power isn't in shouting louder. It's in controlling the tempo. The one who sets the rhythm controls the outcome. This is how modern Machiavellian strategy works, not through domination, but through positioning. You don't fight for power, you create the frame where power naturally belongs to you. You don't need to convince anyone that you're valuable. You move as though you already are. You don't need to demand respect. You carry yourself in a way that makes disrespect costly. So stop trying to be understood and start becoming unreadable. Let them guess. Let them misread you. Let them build stories that don't touch the truth. Because while they're busy speculating, you're conserving energy, and energy is currency. Control isn't about dominance. It's about direction. It's the art of choosing where your focus goes and who deserves to receive it. You no longer owe anyone your explanations. You no longer owe them access. You no longer owe them emotional labor just because they don't get it. You're not being rude. You're being efficient. When they say you've changed, they're right. You have. You've stopped operating on guilt. You've stopped translating your silence for people who never listen to your words. You've become selective. You've become calculated. You've become immune to chaos. That's not coldness. That's clarity. Because power doesn't roar. It recalibrates. It's not about being louder in the room. It's about being the reason the room goes quiet. Once upon a time, you used to chase peace. Now, you enforce it. You used to beg for closure. Now, your absence is the closure. You used to over-explain your worth. Now, your silence proves it better than words ever could. This new version of you doesn't chase, doesn't plead, doesn't negotiate with chaos. You calculate, you observe, you act quietly, decisively, and only when necessary. That's why Machiavelli said, "Power is never forgettable, but nice disappears when it's no longer useful." So stop trying to be nice. Start being unforgettable. Be the presence that shifts the room even when you say nothing. Be the calm that unnerves those who once toyed with your emotions. Be the storm that doesn't rage, it rearranges. You don't owe love to those who used your softness. You don't owe kindness to people who only spoke it when they wanted something. You don't owe access to those who never earned it. You're not the strong one anymore, not if strength means bleeding quietly. You're not the loyal one anymore, not if loyalty means betraying yourself. You are the sovereign one, calm, deliberate, self-owned. You come and go by choice. You speak when it matters. You move when it's time. And that's what true control looks like: silent, strategic, and undeniable. You don't need to be seen to be powerful. You don't need to be liked to be respected. You don't need to be understood to be remembered. Because the new face of power doesn't chase. It doesn't explain. It doesn't beg to be chosen. It simply steps back and forces the room to adjust. That's what Machiavelli understood better than anyone. Power that lasts is quiet. It's not built through noise or validation, but through control of your presence, your emotions, and your access. The world isn't ruled by the kind. It's ruled by the aware, by those who read the room instead of begging it to see them. He didn't write for the innocent. He wrote for those ready to wake up, for those willing to admit that fairness doesn't govern life, and that goodness without strategy is just a slow form of surrender. You've spent years trying to be easy to love, easy to forgive, easy to handle. But the people who wanted your softness never wanted your truth. They wanted your compliance. So you buried your edge, silenced your instincts, softened your fire, and you called it growth. But what you called becoming better was really becoming smaller. Now, the version of you that stayed quiet to keep the peace is gone, and in its place stands someone different, someone who no longer asks for permission to exist. This is the shift Machiavelli wrote about, not from kindness to cruelty, but from confusion to clarity. Because the real question isn't, will they still love me if I say this? The real question is, will I still love myself if I stay silent? Power begins there when you choose yourself, even if it means losing the room. And yes, that clarity will scare people. It will make them call you distant, cold, arrogant. But those words are just the echoes of those who thrived on your compliance. They liked you better when you were predictable, when your guilt made you generous, when your kindness had no cost. But now, your stillness feels heavier, your silence feels sharper, your presence feels unshakable, and they can feel it that something in you has shifted permanently. You've stopped bleeding just to keep others warm. You've stopped explaining your value to those who already proved they couldn't see it. You've stopped apologizing for taking up space that's rightfully yours, because your peace is no longer free. Your attention is no longer infinite, and your silence is no longer a blank check for people to cash. You're learning the most Machiavellian truth of all. Power doesn't come from taking, it comes from stopping. Stopping the over-explaining. Stopping the over-giving, stopping the reflex to fix what others keep breaking. And in that stillness, something incredible happens. People start to feel your absence more than they ever valued your presence. They'll say, "You've changed," and you'll nod, because you have. You've stopped negotiating your boundaries to make others comfortable. You've stopped performing strength that destroys you. You've stopped calling silence peace when it was really repression. Now you pause before reacting. You calculate before committing. You observe before offering energy. Because not everyone deserves your access. This isn't coldness, it's calibration. This isn't pride, it's protection. Goodness without limits isn't virtue, it's self-abandonment. You don't owe comfort to people who confuse your compassion for weakness. You don't owe explanation to those who never listened. You don't owe forgiveness to those who only return to test your limits. Because you've realized real peace doesn't beg to be understood. It simply enforces its terms. You've stopped proving that you're a good person. You've started living like a whole one. And yes, it feels foreign at first. The distance, the stillness, the new identity that no longer revolves around pleasing. You'll want to explain yourself, to reassure everyone that you haven't changed too much. But don't, because change is the point, you're no longer chasing validation, you're commanding gravity. You don't need to shout to be felt. Your silence already shifts the air. That's what power really is. Not dominance, not noise, but gravity. The kind that pulls the world toward you without ever moving a muscle. And when you master that kind of stillness, people notice. The ones who used to manipulate your empathy will feel uneasy. The ones who fed off your predictability will call you different. And they'll be right. Because you've stopped being a pattern. You've stopped being their mirror. You've stopped being the emotional anchor for people who were never steady themselves. Now you move like fog seen, but untouchable. Present, but impossible to pin down. You've learned the truth Machiavelli whispered centuries ago. The promise given was a necessity of the past. The word broken is a necessity of the present. You are allowed to change, to evolve, to unlearn, even if it disappoints those who benefited from your old self. You are no longer loved for how much you endure. You are respected for how clearly you define the line. You don't move to be followed. You move because it's time. You don't speak to be heard. You speak because it matters. You don't stay to be remembered. You stay where you are respected. That's sovereignty. And sovereignty doesn't announce itself. It simply exists quiet, steady, undeniable. So let them talk. Let them project. Let them call you cold. You're not cold. You're controlled. You're not the fixer anymore. You're the line no one crosses twice. You're not the echo. You're the silence that ends the noise. This is your final transformation, not into something new, but into what you were always meant to be. Clear, still, and untouchable. Because now, the world doesn't shape you. It adjusts to you. And that's the quietest, most dangerous kind of power there is.